I started a cult. And yeah, it's been quite fun. I got to name my cult. I named mine the Method Actors. We're all quite dedicated to our vocation. Hell, I even had the power to name my followers and give them any adorably animalistic shape or form at my disposal, and they would just follow me to the ends of the earth, so long as I made an effort to maintain their faith, giving them my daily sermons to spread my gospel, performing rituals with the bones of my slain enemies, you know, the usual stuff. Oh, and of course I made sure to feed them. Apparently I'm the only living soul in this world who knows how to cook, and to mind the hygiene of our sanctuary. These dudes' metabolism are dialed up to like an 11, and apparently the world is their bathroom. So long as these basic needs were maintained, my followers acted as the loyal bedrock for my ascension to godhood. The best way I can describe Cult of the Lamb is it's a faster-paced version of a social farming simulation game like Animal Crossing, mixed with Binding of Isaac's combination of adorable yet twisted vibes, combined with an art style that kind of reminds me of the amazing world of Gumball, I don't know if that's just me, layered with Hades-style fast-paced roguelite action gameplay, and with a tinge of survival. Or to make a long story short, the game is composed of two interconnected halves, cult management and roguelite action. And it didn't take long before the game sunk its hooks in me with its eye-catching visuals, its spectacular and catchy soundtrack, the adorably endearing yet fucked up personality that oozes through every inch of this game's art direction, audio design, and its character animations, and its addictive gameplay loop. The game does a great job of slowly acclimating you to all of your core tasks and peeling back its multitude of layers. Right off the bat, it starts by introducing you to its roguelite action gameplay, which takes place in a treacherous part of the world known as the Lands of the Old Faith. And it's these roguelite runs that act as the main point of progression for the game's roughly 20 hours long campaign. Combat in this game feels fantastic, from smooth mobility and dodging to the satisfying sense of impact that the game evokes every time you hit an enemy with melee attacks and curses. And it's also out there in these treacherous lands that you will find new followers to indoctrinate, each with varying positive and negative traits. And it's also out here that you'll find vital resources and unlockables such as crafting materials, food and cooking ingredients, money, cosmetic blueprints, peculiar characters with peculiar things to say or services to offer, and more. After every run, you'll return to home base, to the sanctuary that is your cult's headquarters, and this is where the bulk of your progression takes place. Your followers can be tasked with gathering resources or worshipping your shrine to earn a currency known as devotion, essentially experience points to level up and earn a skill point called Divine Inspiration, which can be spent on unlocking new buildings. The shrine is where progression for the cult management half of the game takes place, and all of these unlockable buildings contribute to making your cult more and more automatic and more self-sufficient. You'll eventually be able to build lumber yards and stone mines instead of having to rely on the scarcity of chopping down trees and breaking down boulders. You'll be able to build farms where you can plant seeds to grow food instead of having to seek them out in the wild. Bathrooms, so you won't have to clean up after your followers' shit, and so you can recycle them as either fertilizer or, I shit you not, cook into a meal. Some followers are apparently into that. You'll be able to build beds and houses for your followers to sleep in, a medical bay to heal sick followers faster, prisons to keep disgruntled dissenters at bay, offering statues where followers will leave resources as gifts for you, just to name a few. And once the game allows you to build a temple, this is where progression for the roguelite half of the game will take place. Every day you can give a sermon to draw energy from your followers to level up your roguelite skill tree, which unlocks new and higher level weapons and curses. But other aspects of the temple serve to power up your cult as well. So throughout the game you'll collect pieces of what are called commandment stones. And once you complete one, you can spend it on unlocking what are called doctrines, which offer new rituals and shape the kinds of actions that will grant you faith from your followers. but only half of these doctrines will be available per playthrough, as you're always asked to make a choice between 2 doctrines, and the one you don't pick gets locked out. So you can effectively make cult builds based on the kind of cult you want to run. You can pick the doctrines that will pave the road to a kinder cult, or one that's more oppressive, or maybe a mix of both. So like right here, I went with the more oppressive doctrine, the Murder Follower doctrine, that unlocks the Murder Follower action. That way, if there is a dissenter or somebody rubs me the wrong way, I can just solve the problem. As for rituals, they're akin to ultimate abilities for your cult, some of which will expend faith to grant a major benefit, and others which will significantly refill your faith while offering extra effects along the way. So, for example, there's one ritual that allowed me to sacrifice a follower to earn faith, which synergized with another doctrine I'd unlocked that grants extra faith if I sacrifice or murder elderly followers instead of letting them die naturally of old age. Oh yeah, your followers do age and die, by the way, and once a follower becomes an elder, they're unable to work and are quite literally useless for your cult. That is, unless you pick the alternative doctrine that boosts your faith for every elderly in your cult, but I picked the murder your cult elders doctrine instead. Another ritual allows me to expend faith in order to resurrect a formerly fallen or sacrificed follower, and that allowed me to keep bringing back the first follower I married. And yes, you can marry in this game. It's one of the rituals you can unlock, and it grants a ton of faith and also allows you to gain extra loyalty from your spouse through the smooch action. And this being a cult, of course, you can marry as many followers as you want, though there is the chance that they'll start getting jealous of each other, so be aware of that. Speaking of loyalty, that's another layer to your cult management. Each follower has essentially loyalty levels that, when increased, when loyalty is leveled up, first of all, the follower will give you a good amount of devotion alongside a piece of commandment stone to unlock new doctrines, but for the long term, followers with higher loyalty will grant more devotion and energy during shrine worshipping or temple sermons, and they'll just generally work harder for you. And if you really want to boost loyalty at a consistent pace, you can choose this doctrine that unlocks a ritual that assigns a follower as a loyalty enforcer. Or if you're in a more celebratory mood, you can unlock a feast ritual that boosts faith and maxes out your hunger meter in a pinch. If your followers are starving and you forgot to make a meal and you just need to max out their hunger meter. And for something more productive, there's this ritual that instantly finishes construction on all in-progress buildings, which synergized with a doctrine I picked where followers are super into erecting new buildings that boost their faith. And so that was a powerful synergy right there. Now, these rituals do have long cooldowns and require you to spend bones to use, and bones can only be looted from slain enemies during roguelite runs, and that encourages you to get out there and hunt. So runs serve as both a path towards campaign completion and an essential way to gather important resources. So yeah, there are many layers to the game's progression systems. I really enjoy the way they all synergize together, and there's this constant sense of progression that made for very satisfying and very addictive gameplay. And then on top of all that, adding an element of pressure is the game's day and night cycle. A full in-game 24-hour cycle is about 10 to 15 minutes long, I'd say, and during the day is when followers will be up and working and interactable, while at night they'll go to sleep and get some rest, unless you perform a ritual that expends faith to keep them working for 3 days and nights straight, or you just wake them up in the middle of the night at the risk of sleep depriving them. Now, 10 to 15 minutes sounds like a decent amount of time until you realize just how much there is to do in any given day. Once the game really starts ramping up how much you're managing, you'll be rushing to get as much stuff done as possible to make the most out of a single day, from remembering to give your daily sermons, to remembering to cook and feed your followers, to placing and building important structures that will further your cult's capabilities, to collecting resources and materials harvested by your hardworking cult members, your followers, to speaking to individual followers and raising their loyalty if you have the right doctrine unlocked for that, to going to all of these different other non-hostile areas outside your cult that unlock over time, like the shack where you can play a gambling minigame called Knucklebones, which is quite fun actually in its simplicity, or this area where you can fish while helping this other cult that's obsessed with keeping a lighthouse lit, to tackling various quests tasked by NPCs you meet out in the wild, or quests procedurally tasked by your own followers, which are optional. You can refuse them, but that comes at a significant cost to faith, more often than not, unless they're crossing the line in terms of what they're asking for, and sometimes they will. You want to do them. Some of the stuff they might ask include performing a specific ritual, recruiting a lost family member or friend who got lost in one of the biomes, so you go out there and rescue them and recruit them and get them back, building something specific, murdering a follower that the quest giver finds suspicious, or they might ask something even more insane, like having you cook something very specific, like a literal bowl of shit. Again, some of these followers are just into that, I guess, even when they know full well that eating the bowl of shit will culminate in an explosion of vomit and diarrhea, and might lead to sickness and death. So yeah, this game does not shy away from its own bizarreness, and I really frickin' love that. I will say, though, it almost becomes too much to manage at times because a full in-game day takes such a short time to pass. I almost wish the day and night cycle lasted a little bit longer. There are times where it feels like the game doesn't give you room to just breathe and relax and take in what you've created. Though that sense of urgency does mean you'll always feel like a busy bee, like you always have something to do, and that'll definitely keep you engaged, but it can feel a bit draining over a long stretch of time. The same sense of urgency is present during roguelite runs, as time does continue to pass during them. So if you take too long, if you get stuck in a run for too long, you might return to find, poop and vomit all over the place. Maybe somebody got sick and it made other people sick, or you just didn't clean up before you left. You may find faith being at dangerously low levels for any number of reasons, which can give rise to dissenter followers. Or you might return to find starving followers who, if left unattended, may die of hunger because you forgot to cook them meals before heading out or didn't cook enough meals. There is definitely an incentive to rush through runs, as the faster you complete them, the sooner you can get back to managing your cult, which could fall apart if left unmanned and unattended for too long. So time management is a key part of the gameplay loop, something that you'll always have at the back of your head. As for the runs themselves, there are 4 biomes total, which will progressively unlock throughout the campaign. Much like other roguelites like Binding of Isaac or Hades, runs consist of a combination of procedurally generated rooms and areas with varying layouts that house enemies, bosses, resources, treasures, item and weapon pickups, and from time to time, NPCs who will offer benefits, rewards, quests, unlocks, some backstory or world building, and more. Runs are pretty easy starting out, but the game does eventually begin to pick up in its level of challenge as you progress through the campaign. And not to mention, if you're finding the game too easy or too difficult, you can pick between difficulty settings to your preference. Now, one thing that this game does that I like is that once you complete an area of rooms and move on to the next area, you're presented a map of branching paths that lead to the run's boss, with symbols here that highlight what you'll find in each area, be it another hostile area full of enemies, a shop area of some sort, an area of respite containing resources like stone, wood, food, followers, or health. And question marks could be any number of things, usually involving one of the game's myriad charming NPCs who may offer interesting gifts or services, unlock something new, share some backstory, offer challenges like beat the next set of rooms without using dodge or without using curses for a reward, and more. And based on your needs and what your goals are for a specific run, you can choose the path that you want to take towards the run's boss. And then at the end of each run, after beating the boss, you'll find the door that will unlock after the 4th successful run of the biome, allowing you to fight the biome's big boss past that door, and then progress through the campaign story, unlock new biomes by defeating the big boss. Now, when it comes to story, there's not a whole lot of it in Cult of the Lamb. You'll definitely find some interesting world building here and there, and there is a basic plot, but the story essentially bogs down to a sealed god known as the One Who Waits, asking you to start a cult in his name so you can take down the 4 bishops, the 4 big bosses, who chained and imprisoned him, and once they're dead, he can be liberated and returned as the mighty ruler he once was. The story is definitely not the main focus of this game, whereas Hades put significant importance on the narrative. That's not the case, I'd say, with Cult of the Lamb. Gameplay is mainly where it's at, a significant part of which is combat, which, as I previously mentioned, feels really good, fluid, smooth, and on top of all that, combat offers a variety of weapon archetypes with variations in speed and damage. from daggers to swords to axes to gauntlets to hammers, which randomly spawn throughout. And as you progress through the temple skill tree, not only will you unlock higher level versions of those weapons, you'll also unlock new variations, like ones that poison enemies, others which summon ghostly projectiles every time you hit an enemy, others which drain life from enemies, others which just deal a ton more damage, and more. So that's for melee attacks. Paired with your weapons are what are known as curses, essentially ranged or AoE attacks that spend the game's version of mana called Fervor, with new curses, essentially spells, unlocking as you progress through the temple skill tree. In the temple, you can also unlock what are called crown abilities by spending a resource called Heart of a Heretic, earned by defeating a bishop, one of the major campaign bosses. There are 4 of these total, and they'll allow you to do things like sacrifice a follower to revive yourself during a run, or give you the ability to return to your cult in the middle of a run, or you can eat food before a run for an extra blue heart. And then on top of that, you can earn pieces of what are called Holy Talismans, the pieces which are given to you by NPC quests to unlock equipment called Fleeces that grant a benefit in exchange for a detriment. It's this modifier equipment, essentially. So the one that I like to wear is called the Golden Fleece, which gives you a 10% increase in damage for every enemy killed with no caps, apparently. You can get this thing up to like 1,000% extra damage if you take no damage throughout a run and do really well. But if you get hit once, that damage boost goes back down to 0. It resets and you have to rebuild that up again. And you also take double damage from enemies. So there's stuff like that that you can play around with to customize your playstyle. Layered on top of all that are the tarot cards, which are the primary form of roguelite item pickups in Cult of the Lamb, all of which provide some beneficial effects, be it increased damage, increased speed, better defense, better drops, extra health, a full map reveal, and more. I will say that this is the one area where the game does fall short. When you look at a game like Binding of Isaac, there is such a huge variety of item pickups, some more substantial than others, but the ones that are substantial have a drastic effect on your offensive and defensive capabilities, as well as just your run, to the point where you can potentially break the game with the right insane combination of items. In a game like Hades, the boons granted by the gods change up your run's build enough to make new runs feel fresh and interesting, on top of the fact that you can unlock different forms for your various weapons to further change up gameplay. In Cult of the Lamb, however, the tarot card effects are nowhere near as impactful, as varied, as substantial in how they affect gameplay, so runs do eventually start to feel kind of samey and a bit stale. Sure, new enemies are introduced in every new biome, though I did generally find that enemy variety was a bit lacking as well, and there is variance in the weapons and curses that procedurally spawn, but those on their own I don't think are anywhere near enough to offer the level of replayability and builds insanity that aforementioned roguelites do. By the time I was done with the almost 20-hour-long campaign, aside from a few side quests left to complete and some tarot cards and cosmetic decorations left to unlock, I found very little reason to keep playing much further, to keep doing runs of the roguelite gameplay. It doesn't help matters that gameplay affecting progression trees can be maxed out within the length of the campaign. There's just this distinct lack of a substantial endgame to keep you coming back for dozens or hundreds of hours. And the same applies to the other half of the game, the cult management aspect. By the end of the campaign, your cult will be thriving with ease. You'll be rich with excess resources and gold, but you won't have a whole lot more to spend them on. And you'll have mostly seen everything the roguelite runs have to offer by the time credits roll. Now, you can delve deeper into each biome once you have defeated its bishop, and difficulty will increase for those biomes, so you can challenge yourself that way, but without the level of roguelite run variance that more fleshed out games of the genre offer, I'm personally not compelled to do these runs over and over and over again. I've put dozens, maybe hundreds of hours into Binding of Isaac, and I'm still coming up with new, crazy, insane builds. I don't get the sense that Cult of the Lamb will offer anything like that if I keep doing runs with this game. And this is at the 20-hour mark. Now, some people may be able to squeeze extra juice out of this game by partaking in its cosmetic customization. You're constantly unlocking these decoration blueprints throughout the game, and with how easy it is to edit your sanctuary using the intuitive building system, you have all the flexibility in the world to cosmetically customize your cult headquarters to your heart's content. It's very much akin to Animal Crossing's island decoration pursuit, but whereas the process in Animal Crossing is a slow and meticulous one, the process in Cult of the Lamb is basically on fast forward, with building construction happening much more quickly, and with your godlike ability to quickly pick up, move, drag, and drop buildings around. People who enjoy instant gratification will definitely love this, but it does also mean that the cult decoration aspect will be short-lived compared to Animal Crossing. The point that I'm arriving at with all of this is that, from my experience, both the roguelite gameplay and the cult simulation gameplay top off too quickly, which is why I hope there are plans to expand upon the roguelite and cult management gameplay the way Binding of Isaac meteorically expanded since launch and continues to expand, as there's just too good of a foundation with Cult of the Lamb for it to peak so early. This is one of those games that's begging to be infinitely replayable, but doesn't have the content for that, at least not yet. I could potentially see myself starting a new game just to pick new doctrines, to see how different it feels to play a cult that's been built completely differently. So there's some replayability there, but I feel like there's potential to expand much more upon the replayability of this game. But with that said, the time that I did spend with this game was addictive, fun, unique, and charming to behold. I love the concept of this game. I love much of its execution. I just think it needs more. But then again, if you're interested in a social farming experience that combines roguelite and want that to have a finality to it, something that doesn't require a huge time investment or something that doesn't feel like it never ends, what I label as drawbacks for replayability could be seen by others as a welcome aspect to this title. But I, for one, want more excuses and reasons to keep coming back to this game because there's such a solid foundation here, and I hope that there are plans for that down the pipeline. But overall, yeah, I spent a great 20 hours with this game, and the fact that I want more excuses to come back to it, that I want more from it, says a lot. I think plenty of folks will be drawn to this game and be endeared by it. I would definitely recommend you give this game a go, and at a purchase price of just $25, yeah, I think it's honestly a no-brainer to check this out. If not now, at least someday.